We hear it all the time that the first 6 weeks postpartum are the hardest. Then you go to your 6-week final checkup, you get all clear, and then what happens? Like, what is supposed to happen after that? Are you supposed to feel back to yourself? Are you supposed to be bouncing back and feel normal again? No. I thought today maybe we can talk about why postpartum is far more than 6 weeks long. People often still refer to the postpartum period of being only the first 6 weeks. And girl, I'm going to tell you, there is a lot that happens after the 6 weeks. If this is your first time here, my name is Dr. Piper Grant. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I am a mama and the founder of Born into Motherhood. In this space, I seek to validate, to educate, to normalize all of the things that we do and go through in motherhood. I hope that in this space you find information that helps you in your life and or even helps your partner in understanding about what's going on for you. And recently, I have been thinking about the postpartum period and really realizing that, like, despite us understanding that postpartum goes far beyond the 6 weeks. By the way, that's not months, that's years we're talking about now for postpartum. That many people talk about leaving their 6-week checkup and got all clear. And that means that they're supposed to be done with postpartum or they're supposed to be bouncing back. And we know that's not true. So in this video, what I want to talk about is why there is that myth that postpartum is 6 weeks. Because just spoiler alert, it was men in the medical field that decided that that's what it was. I want to talk about actually what is happening to us during the postpartum phase. And that means past, at the 6-week mark, what is actually still happening and how that will actually carry on past 6 weeks so that you understand it is far beyond the 6 weeks. And I just want to talk a little bit about what support we need past that 6 weeks, because there is this pressure that at the 6-week mark, or even now some people say the 10-week mark, to bounce back, be back to normal and be back in it. And for many moms who don't feel that at the 6-week mark or the 10-week mark, there's this wondering of like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I feel this? And I think it's important for us to understand that there is so much actually happening way past the 6-week mark. So let's talk about like where this myth of postpartum being 6 weeks actually came from. So for a long time, and mostly really based in medical guidelines, we have said that the postpartum period is 6 weeks. And where that came from was in medical literature. What they decided and what they observed is that at the 6-week mark is when most women had tears that were healed, C-section incisions that were healed, and mostly from a physical standpoint, the body had recovered from birth. And so that's when things were supposed to be back to normal. The thing is that at the 6-week mark is just when the adrenaline wears off. Literally, that's just when the adrenaline wears off. That's just when you're moving out of survival. Many women are still bleeding at 6 weeks. Some women's scarring and tearing is not healed yet. If women are breastfeeding, they're still trying to find a constant in their breast milk. For women that are not breastfeeding, they are still experiencing a hormonal shift. But what that 6-week mark kind of came from, literally was from primarily male doctors observing pregnant and birthing women and saying, cool, at 6 weeks, body looks healed, should be good to go. By the way, yes, you can have sex again. No regard for emotionally what's happening for the woman, spiritually what's happening for the woman, hormonally what's happening for the women, all of the identity shifts that are happening. And so the 6-week mark to me really just marks almost like the beginning of postpartum, in the sense that right then you are coming out of, not right then, but that's the time frame that you're typically coming out of survival mode. Like I said, the adrenaline is wearing off, the hormones are trying to find themselves. And it's kind of just the first time a woman starts to be able to kind of look around and say like, whoa, here I am in this new life as a mom. So let's talk about like what's actually happening at the 6-week mark to understand how there is so much more that happens in the postpartum phase beyond 6 weeks. Okay, so let's talk about what's actually happening after the 6-week mark, both in your brain and your body, because the changes are still so dramatic. Obviously, there's massive hormonal changes. You have had the biggest drop of estrogen and progesterone that you will ever experience in a lifetime, that people can experience. It drops dramatically, and it doesn't stabilize for months, you guys. Not just 6 weeks is it suddenly like, cool, I'm stable. It doesn't stabilize for months. I mean, honestly, I feel like as women, I don't know if our hormones ever really stabilize because there's so many different seasons in our life, but that's for another time. And what we know is this impacts mood. This impacts emotions, it impacts libido, it impacts brain function, it impacts every single aspect that you can really possibly imagine. Hormones are so important. And so many times what women are actually experiencing is what's called a postpartum depletion during this time. Postpartum depletion is where their body is actually still recovering long after birth, far beyond the 6 weeks. We also see a lot of brain changes that are happening. These neurological changes continue to happen. They start during pregnancy and they continue to happen far after having a baby. It is actually one of, I think, the wildest things that happen to us. I mean, I'm also, if you've ever been and listened to my stuff before, I'm like super fascinated by the neurological changes. And when we look at the structural changes that happen and how they continue to evolve and change and why they change, it's absolutely fascinating. But there is this in the maternal brain, there is this reorganizing of the brain, a rewiring. We prune to like really help prioritize bonding and protection and to have a heightened awareness of all of the things that are happening around us and baby. So this continues to happen far beyond the 6-week period. This is also why moms, and we've talked about this in another video, in another episode, this is also why moms experience a heightened hypervigilance. They have a heightened anxiety. There might be some extreme emotional swings or some hyper protection, it feels like. But this process doesn't just stop at 6 weeks. You don't just hit the 6-week mark and you're done to go and your brain stops doing all of this. It continues. What some people say is at least 2 years. I saw some research recently. It's like up to 3 years we're looking at. So, I mean, I would beg to differ that, it actually just continues to probably evolve and change as our children also evolve and develop. There's also your identity is still shifting. So there's these major structural changes that happen in the brain. And also there's a lot that starts happening around us, right? And so our identity shifts from women to mother or woman who becomes a mom. And sometimes women don't expect this identity shift. And so as you come out of survival mode and you start going back into your life, you start going back into work, you start going back, or maybe you've decided to leave work and you're staying in the home, or all of these changes, you're starting to meet new friends through having children, all of these things. Women start experiencing this identity shift. And this, again, continues to happen way beyond the 6-week period. And the reality of what motherhood looks like long-term starts to settle in. I think that's actually a big thing. I remember when my eldest, my firstborn, I think that I must have been like 10 weeks postpartum. Maybe she was already like 3 months. I don't know, somewhere there. And I don't know why it had just occurred to me that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have this baby for at least a year and they don't say anything. Like it's going to take me a whole year of having to like pick up the cues and determine what they need, like without them saying anything. I remember asking somebody like, when do children start talking? And even though, like, as a clinical psychologist, I knew the and by the way, somebody trained in working with children and families, okay? I knew that in theory, but in practice, as a mom, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I have this human that does not communicate with me, and I have to figure out how to do that. Now, granted, there is obviously a lot of nonverbal communication, but this reality of what motherhood looks like long-term totally set for me. And I was just like, oh, okay, this is a little bit different than maybe I had told myself in fantasy. So this constant shifting in identity also goes way beyond the 6 weeks. And that's why, and there's the term matrescence, which is like, if you imagine adolescence, is that like moving into adulthood, right? That transition from child to adult. Matrescence is this moving into motherhood. And matrescence goes way beyond the 6 weeks. It's actually only really starting to really like percolate in those early weeks, actually. So this idea that 6 weeks is the end of postpartum, I just have to debate it. So let's talk about actually what happens though when we adopt this idea and this pressure to bounce back. So on top of all these changes that are happening in our body and in our identity and all of these radical shifts that are happening around us, there's also this cultural pressure to bounce back. And this idea that we have this 6 week postpartum, I really think does such a disservice. This is why I want to like talk about this. I think it's such a disservice to us. It's such a disservice to our partners. It's such a disservice to the workplace. It's such a disservice to all of us. Because when we hold this myth of 6 weeks postpartum, we then either judge ourselves as mom and or others are judging us. And there's this pressure to bounce back, that somehow you have to get your body back or get back to work at 6 weeks or get back to doing all the things that you used to do before having a baby. And yet for a woman who's at 6 weeks postpartum, she's just coming out of survival mode. She's like, whoa, I am not ready for this. I can't tell you how many women I speak to that if they're going back into the workplace, you know, they've only gotten a few weeks off, they're like rarely ready. Maybe they are ready to get out of the house and have adult conversations. And maybe they are ready to feel like they've got something that is theirs again, rather than just always being quote unquote in service to a baby. But when you look at their identity, when you talk to them about after going back to work and how their body is feeling, there is often many women who are like, I'm not ready for it, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, whatever it is on one of those elements. And I think where we continue to like hinder women in their process of becoming moms in this journey of matrescence is that this pressure is to go back, to bounce back, to be back to that which we were before. And the thing is mama, you ain't going back there. You are not the same. Your brain has forever changed. Your body has now forever changed. I mean, literally you are carrying fetal cells, you're carrying cells of your baby and potentially your partner in your body. And so this idea of bouncing back and going back, I think does a disservice to women because it's as if that they need to go back to that person and if the pre-birth woman, and if they're not, there's something wrong with them. When in fact, you are changed, you are evolving. And if we can really embrace that, what grace we could give ourselves in that journey. And so what do we really need in postpartum? Rather than telling ourselves it stops at 6 weeks, what do we actually need? I think we need really good support that goes far beyond the 6 weeks. So that means past your 6 week checkup, I think it is important to still go back and get your hormones tested, get your thyroid tested. What we really need is nutrition that carries us through the various stages of the hormonal shifts. I think also what we really need is to validate the experience of moms in which postpartum goes through a lifetime, essentially, right? Like this full spectrum of postpartum and this journey of matrescence is actually really important to acknowledge and to validate for moms. And lastly, I think that we need to allow women to do postpartum on their own timeline. And I don't mean that just physically, like yes, your scars and your wounds and anything that happens to your body will heal in its own time, but also to allow women to realize like your postpartum journey is your own and with each child. My postpartum journey with one child was so different than it was with another. Things were so different in my environment. Things were so different in my body. Things were so different in my mind. And so really allowing women to do their own postpartum journey on their own timeline with each and every child and pregnancy that they have is vital. It just allows us to have the freedom to feel not like we have to bounce back to anything, not like we have to get to anything. I'm just in it and I'm just doing it. So if any of this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, follow. It is so nice to have you here. I love to hear from you. Drop a comment, drop me a DM, and I'll see you soon.